So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we are going to be making a return to Helm's Deep for the first time in this patch of the game, at least in the ones that I'm going to be showing. I have played on a Helm's Deep battle in this current patch, but today is going to be something a little bit different because Isengard have taken control of Helm's Deep, as you can see, and it now must be reclaimed by Rohan and a few of the allies that they have been able to muster. So Isengard currently hold the legendary fortress, and we'll go through the attackers first and foremost. It's quite a long battle. There will be a cut after the deployment phase as well, because obviously it's going to take a while to march into position for the attackers because they start on sort of rather opposing sides of the battlefield. We have Son of the Dunedain, who's going to be playing as the realm of Lothlorien, so the natural allies to Rohan in this situation, albeit this time on the attack. March Wardens of the Wood with their poison arrows. Breaking Isengard is not going to be easy when they're dug in like this, and it's not going to serve much of a purpose, but Elven Archers are of course more damaging by default, so that's still going to be useful if they can get into the right position. Lorien Warriors are a very useful unit to bring in this situation. They're going to be really good at battering their way through more defensive Isengard positions with their big armor-piercing values, and as elves of course they're not going to suffer from the extremely low melee defense values that heavy axemen can. Lots of Blades of the Wood. Obviously when you're on the attack, particularly in this sort of situation, the elves are going to have to invest in some of their lower end units, but Blades of the Wood by line infantry standards are still going to be really good when it comes to just a straight up brawl in melee, because the superior melee defense of the elves is going to once again come into play there. Their lighter armor could be a concern, however, against some of the Isengard skirmishers. Galathrym Blade Masters as well, so the slightly lighter of the two heavy swordsmen that Lothlorien can bring. They can hide, they are also a little bit cheaper, which might be why Son of the Dunedain decided to bring them on this occasion. He might not have been able to afford the Lorien Sword Masters, but the Blade Masters will still fulfill the same role, and it's not too much of a difference between the two, honestly. Can't really ambush in this situation though, which is their main forte. Kerin Amril Staff Masters, pretty much a melee tar pit because they have extremely high melee defense values, and they also have the armor upgrade here as well, but they don't really serve much for purpose other than that. They don't do a lot of damage quickly, although that damage is AP. They are rather similar to the Barrow Wights, only the Barrow Wights hit points do make them better at this sort of thing, I think, whereas the Staff Masters are still very vulnerable to range damage, but they can be good in melee at that role, and they're cheap as well, which may be why they've been brought, certainly by Elven standards. Karas Gladhon's Guardians, it's debatable now whether they are actually the best pike in the game, with the armor piercing being given to the First Legion pikes, but the multiple HP does make them still the tankiest, and in this sort of situation, especially when going up against the more numerous Isengard pikes, they are going to need to rely on quality more so than quantity. Rangers, of course, if they can get into the right position, they're going to be devastating. Riders of the Golden Wood with their Silverthorn arrows gives them a little bit of mobility, which could be useful. In a settlement as condensed as Helm's Deep, though, I kind of doubt it. I would have preferred to see the foot variant of them. The Woodland Protectors over here, and the Kindred of Celeborn, of course, with the split shot arrows, which is where Haldia is going to be. Then, more centrally, we can see that this is where Irish Gunner and the Rohirrim are located. So some civilians, some Eastmark Spearmen, which of course have got those javelins. They are a little bit more expensive in the current patch, and sort of generally speaking they've tried to make it fit a little bit better, and they have succeeded to an extent. I think they're still not my favourite unit, at least in terms of what they sort of represent, but they still fulfil a role now at the very least. Rohirrim though, over here, civilians, Eastmark Spearmen getting ready to march up to the gate and die for the cause. The rest of the Rohirrim army, it looks like quite a lot of it is actually hidden back there. Rohan Catapult, Helms Hammers, a really strong unit of armor-piercing line infantry. Westmark Marshals, obviously in melee, Rohan certainly don't lack for AP. Unlike the elves, they do lack a little bit more for melee defense, but by the same token, I mean, you know, Rohan are probably going to be able to build a larger army anyway, so it does kind of work itself out. A couple of units of Westmark infantry as well, of course, which on the wall with their melee defense, which is actually pretty decent, as well as their damage. They should be well kitted out to try and go toe-to-toe with Isengard's heavy units. And finally, we have Pharaoh, who's going to be playing as the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum, Guards of Khazad-Dum, Mithril Guard in there, Sentries once again, so really heavy duty army. I don't know how they managed to convince the Dwarves to come out from their mines, but they have, to join with themselves and the elves. The rest of their army is hidden, which will of course make itself apparent. I'd imagine very high-end army from Khazad-Dum, even with less money to play with, because their heavy duty units are very difficult to bring down at the best of times. And they can certainly outmuscle Isengard. Isengard on the defence, however, Hrothgar Heavenlight and someone else on the defence, Ord Malleus. So we've got some Dunland clansmen here up on the walls. And that was WhatsApp, if you'll just excuse me. Apologies for that, but keeping in touch with people from university can only really be done with WhatsApp at the moment. But as I was saying, Uruk-hai archers up on the walls, obviously ready to launch a few volleys into the attackers. Pikes, infantry, pretty much what you'd expect from Isengard. Obviously the heavy central Uruk-hai, supported here and there by some of the lower tier Dunlanders, and I would imagine as well some of the higher tier units such as the Nazkai, Guards of Orthanc, here and there some artillery. For some reason the Isengard artillery crew is almost entirely invisible, which is a strange bug, because they don't really have anything unique to their models, unless it got mixed up with the Isengard ballista somewhere. Crossbows up on the walls could be super useful, of course, and then a really strong point of all of the heavy Uruk-hai units beyond the gate. It's going to be difficult to batter their way through them. Baneguard, Guards of Orthanc as well, Uruk-hai crossbowmen up here on the walls. And yeah, you can see some Lurt's hunting pack are up there as well. So I think I am going to make a bit of a cut here, because as I said before, I would imagine that what the attackers are going to do is wait until they're grouped up before they start the assault. I'd be very surprised if Irish Gunner moved forward immediately, especially with what would have to be considered all around the squishiest army. Lothlorien armour-wise are around there with them, of course, but they don't have the melee defence value, so I'd imagine Rohan are probably going to wait. So with that, going to make a cut, and we'll rejoin when the battle begins. So the wall is now under attack, so we're actually going to rejoin sooner than I was expecting here, as the Uruk-hai archers are also opening up on Rohan as they move forward. Khazad-Dum, of course, have got far shorter of a distance to cover than Lothlorien, so I guess it does make a little bit of sense. I mean, Khazad-Dum overall are definitely going to have the units which you would imagine, at the very least, to be most resilient, especially to the Uruk-hai archers. You can see here the warriors of Khazad-Dum going to be pushing up the siege towers. They're obviously with... In terms of armour values, they're not going to be quite as good as some of the higher tier dwarven units that are on display. Even stuff like the 3rd Legion here, even without the armour upgrade, are going to be superior in that regard. But there's a lot of them, and of course the dwarves, especially in comparison to the more lightly armoured Rohirrim and detachments from Lothlorien. Uruk-hai archers are really going to do very little, especially with the additional cover that the siege towers are providing here. So it's going to be quite tough, I think, for Isengard to get good value off here with their Uruk-hai archers, depending on what they're firing at. If they're trying to go after and thread them up, or thread the needle, I should say, to some of the Rohirrim units, which I think is actually what they're going to try and do. But even with that being the case, you can actually see that some of the more fragile Rohan units, it looks as though they have been brought back a little bit. There's the Medicel Guard. Hammers of Gundabad have revealed themselves there. You can see some Dunlanding clansmen sadly plummeted to their doom as the wall crumbled. But Rohan trying to get some of their more fragile shock troops out of the way, which I agree with. Because that would be one of the few targets I think that an archer on the level of the Uruk-hai archers would reliably be able to kill off quickly. They're just sort of throwing some pot shots down range. I mean, that is the good thing about playing the orcs on the defence, of course. It means that you can be a little bit more liberal with your manpower, like losing sort of a portion of these Dunlanding clansmen on the wall like that is not really all that detrimental to their chances going forward. If that were a unit like Berserkers, for example, it might be a little bit more so. There's some Berserkers waiting just there, of course. But being the evil factions on the defence gives you a little bit more wiggle room for disposable units. Obviously, that's not indefinite. They do need to be careful here, because the manpower that the attacks are bringing, especially with the depth of quality, especially the dwarves and elves can bring in this sort of situation, is going to be slightly dicey. As we can see here, Isengard shuffling their army around, getting themselves into a decent position here. The Uruk-hai archers getting down off the walls just about. I mean, it can be a little bit of an annoying process to get your units off the walls when they're sort of getting stuck on one another like this, but it does look as though Hrothgar, Heavenlight and Horde Malleus are going to be able to save some of the initial units that were up on that wall. But good work, I have to say, from Irish Gunner. Like, using the catapult on Helm's Deep is to use it well as the attackers. Like, really, first and foremost, you need to make a lot of holes in the walls, I would say. Leave a few for siege towers as well, because the higher ground can definitely be a useful feature as well when you're trying to take the lower sections of the fortress. But you definitely want as many ways into this lower section of the fortress as you possibly can, because obviously trying to brute force your way through just a couple of choke points is going to go pretty poorly, especially when you're considering a faction like Isengard, who definitely have the phalanx units alongside the solid infantry that's going to be able to hold you at bay for a long time, and of course then punchy tools at range like cheap javelins and good solid crossbowmen, as Isengard continue to get themselves into a decent position here to receive the initial waves of this assault, as Pharaoh he is going to be setting up some warriors of Khazad-Dum, getting ready to mount the walls with this siege tower. Dunlanding veterans, of course, wielding those axes, going to be slightly more damaging than other units on this tier, but slightly less melee defense as well. Not armor-piercing one-handed axes, so you would heavily back the dwarves in that sort of situation, but still, the Dunlending veterans will do a little bit more damage than the equivalent Uruk-hai raiders. It's really just a matter of what you want to be doing here. And thinning out the attacker's manpower, especially with largely quality-focused armies, I would have to say. Like, even Rohan, you see the occasional civilian unit, or maybe the Eastmark spears. There's also some Eastmark axemen over here to try and pad out the line, Riddermark axemen. But even Rohan, they've gone for 2 units of Westmark marshals, Helms, hammers, Medicel guard. None of this stuff comes cheap. So it's not quite the numbers padding army from Rohan that it could have been. And that being said, maybe the additional damage will be a good thing. You can see here the Dunlending veterans, a nice gap that the March Wardens of the Wood are exploiting. Good positioning there from the Elven archers armed with their poison arrows. And it's only very basic chainmail and wooden shields that are not pointing the right way that the Dunlending veterans have, so they are going to take some decent damage there, as if the inevitable confrontation with the Dwarven infantry wasn't going to be enough of a beating for them to take. Galathrin Blade Masters down there. Poison arrows thudding into the Uruk-hai infantry as well. So still just taking pot shots, those Elven archers, going after the right targets as well. I mean, the Uruk-hai infantry maybe less so, because obviously heavily armoured and shielded. But Uruk-hai crossbowmen, they are decently armoured for crossbowmen. But even so, if you can kill off enough of these crossbows so that their DPS is compromised, that would be very useful for the attackers moving forward, because this is honestly one of the scarier tools that Isengard have at their disposal. It's interesting to see what they'll actually be shooting at here. They don't have a particularly good line of sight to really go after anything, unless they're going to try and do some return salvos onto the March Wardens of the Wood. But I think this is an example actually of the defenders being outmaneuvered somewhat. You really, if you find a position's not working for you because the enemy is sort of whittling you down, then it's probably best to find an entirely new position. Don't get overly attached to your defensive lines. If you find that they're not in a good place, you need to move them, and that goes for your skirmishers as well. Can't afford to be too wasteful with their crossbowmen here, Isengard, because that will make up a big portion of how they're going to be able to approach this battle successfully, I think. Siege towers moving their way forwards, however. Isengard catapult, obviously the crew is invisible, as I've said before. But the catapults themselves most certainly are not, and they're getting ready to fire through the gap. Thudding into the siege tower. I don't really think going after the siege towers themselves is going to yield too much in the way of value here. Like, you will probably be able to kill off a couple of them like this, but they've got so many of them, and it's not as if Helm's Deep is one of those standard medieval 2 citadel settlements where there's so many walls that you can mount siege towers on. With this amount of siege towers, they're never going to run out of them. It's possible he's going after the Riddermark Axeman, but even so, well covered enough here. Still playing tag with one another to a certain extent here, both armies. From Isengard's perspective, obviously that's very understandable, but the attackers here taking their time trying to set up the ideal assaults, I would imagine. Get the initial waves in with stuff like the Warriors of Khazad-Dum, backed up perhaps with some Riddermark Axemen. That's a pretty good combination. Not overly important units to Khazad-Dum or Isengard either. Eastmark Axemen, on the other hand, very similar actually to the Dunlending veterans, if not maybe a little bit worse overall, because I think their armour values are a little bit lower than the Dunlending veterans. More or less the same unit though, I'd imagine. I think the Rohan variant actually does a little bit more damage as well. Oof. And there you can see, trying to counteract the attacking artillery barrage by going after it with their own catapult. Could turn into a bit of an artillery duel through the gap in the wall here. If you want to snipe out artillery though, you want to turn off Flaming Shot, because Flaming Shot reduces the accuracy of your catapults, of course. Much more damaging to infantry blobs, but not so good if you're going for accuracy. And here we go. Rohan getting up their siege tower, the dwarves also doing the same with their Warriors of Khazad-Dum. These two siege towers seem to be sort of having a dance with one another, which is not ideal from an attacking perspective, but definitely getting the siege towers into place now. Civilians on that one, but that is also a section of wall which is completely uncontested, so they won't need to worry too much about that. Less action happening up towards the gate so far though, which again perhaps is not too surprising. Dunlending veterans getting themselves into position. Very even fight it would be between them and the Eastmark Axemen, but with the addition of that heavy Dwarven infantry as well, it's going to go pretty poorly for Isengard without support. Fortunately, support is something they should have plenty of, really. Uruk-hai archers are a much better unit to be going after the March Wardens of the Wood with, because March Wardens of the Wood, not a lot of armour on them, so even basic archers like the Uruk-hai archers are going to be able to do good damage. Definitely don't want to be wasting bolts on them if you can help it, but interestingly enough, I'm not sure whether it's intentional or not, but the siege tower they placed here is actually partially getting in the way now. That does go both ways though, so the March Wards of the Wood won't have a clear shot into the side of those Dunland veterans anymore. So definitely a bit of give and take there. Eastmark Axemen, some of them jumping down and then some of them jumping back up, so they're going to try, and they're actually the first ones to re-enter the Rohan fortress of Helm's Deep, but they're immediately being met by their hated enemies from Dunland, and the Dunlanders here. A probing assault which didn't really accomplish all that much for Rohan. A few men's lives lost. Other than that, not much in the grand scheme of the battle. Poison arrows. Finding their mark here into the Uruk-hai archers. Most of those arrows that will hit will also result in a kill as well of the Uruk-hai archers. Scraps of leather. Not the best armour. The entry-level Isengard units obviously suffer the same kinds of weaknesses that most Orc factions suffer. Lots of numbers, but obviously in terms of quality, not all that much to offer. Interesting assault coming here as well. The Dunland clansmen able to hold off the civilians, but some genuine soldiers also muscling their way to the front here in the shape of the Riddermark Axemen, vulnerable to missiles. You can see there's actually a lot of missiles finding their mark into this blob so far, but when those axes are swung, these standard clansmen are not going to fare all that well, to be honest with you. These civilians also mounting the walls, immediately actually wavering. So that's definitely going to help the cause of the Dunland clansmen here as they move to try and block Rohan's advance onto this wall. Bit of a... Not so much of a unified assault going on right now. Actually a little bit surprised that the dwarves are not really engaging. Like, they got to the top and then they got right back down again. I can't imagine that was an intentional move from Pharaoh. If it was not a particularly good one. But the dwarves got to the top. The siege tower dropped its bridge. And then they retreated. Ooh, hello. Those are javelins. Eastmark spearmen, not particularly high quality javelins, but they're still being launched into the settlement. Yeah, Riddermark Axemen falling by the wayside here. And this is, so far, I have to say, this assault, it hasn't been a particularly great one, just because it hasn't been unified. They haven't been applying equal pressure to every avenue of assault, and so far that has cost them, I would say. They have more manpower that they can burn through. Meanwhile, up here, Uruk-hai crossbows up on the gatehouse as the dwarves of Khazad-Dum moving up the hill. I'm not entirely sure what he's trying to accomplish here either. I mean, he is going to... I mean, the siege tower will get in the way of these crossbow bolts as they come down, but more to the point, it's going to be blocking the way of the ram when the ram eventually wants to get up here. So, very puzzling moves from Pharaoh so far at the helm of the Khazad-Dum army. But, still, assaults continuing. Rohan, of all of the attacking factions so far, have been the ones most eager to get up close and personal with the enemy, I would have to say, which, fair play to Irish Gunner, but he's also probably the army which is going to be punished the most for doing that, because he's not going to have the same staying power in melee as the elves, nor is he going to be as resilient to these projectiles as the dwarves. And the Isengard catapult there doing far more damage to their own troops. Once again, not the finest performances there, and again the elves coming forward here, the March Wardens of the Wood. And again, Lothlorien perhaps trying to preserve the lives of their better units. You can see way back there, Khazad-Dum have got a lot of their units set up. What about Lothlorien? Where's their army gone to? Just in front here and in amongst all of these siege towers. I can sort of get a feel for the way this battle is going already, actually, and I would worry for the attackers, because outside of Rohan, none of them seem particularly eager to jump in. It's almost as if they're saving their units for a rainy day, and I think the last Reforged siege I showcased, it really demonstrates why I'm not the biggest fan of that. Rohan, though, I mean, Rohan have definitely taken a beating so far, but it's not really their own fault entirely. Yeah, they've marched into situations where they're going to be singled out, but that's only because no one's really following them in. Rohan are really the only ones so far that appear to be in any sort of rush to mount the walls. And it's also giving me an idea as to why this battle might be 40,000 frames long, even if it perhaps doesn't have any real right to be. Yeah, I've already got the suspicion that I should be making a cut here, actually. I'm going to make a cut until the assault begins properly, because I feel as though the longer the elves and the dwarves dance around the real issue here, the more likely a defensive victory becomes. So yeah, I'm going to make a cut until the attackers get their priorities straight. Okay, I think we will rejoin here, but yeah, it's definitely been more of the same, and I'm definitely glad that I did make a little bit of a cut there, because the dwarves once again pushed the siege tower up, had an opportunity to start contesting the walls, and as soon as the bridge dropped, they retreated once again. You know how I feel about this sort of thing if you've watched any of my videos in the past at this point. I think it's poor form. I think it's an example of sort of attackers, or defenders even sometimes, to be fair, not wanting to commit to fights because they want to preserve the lives of their men. It's a very campaign mentality to have. You know, in a one-off multiplayer battle, especially when the funds are sort of engineered to make a closer battle, you're not going to be leaving the battle with most of your army intact. You know, that's just a fact of how this works. You're not going to be getting those, you know, 20% casualty rates that you might be getting from a siege battle in a campaign. It's just not going to happen. And if you play like that in a battle against other players, in a more even siege battle like this, you're going to be doing more damage to yourself in the long run, because the more you try to be cute and clever with tactics like this, the more engagements like this are going to favour the defenders. You know, because you can see the Blades of the Wood are coming in here, doing well against the Uruk-hai archers and the Dunlending clansmen, but over the long haul, the defending skirmish ammo is going to be more well preserved. And that's going to be bad for the attackers as it goes along, because what you really want to be doing is hoping that Isengard don't have access to their crossbow bolts as the battle enters its more crucial phases. But that is less likely to be the case here, because Isengard, other than the couple of volleys they did pour into the Marchwarns of the Wood, they haven't really had cause to use any of their skirmishers, or any of their serious skirmishers just yet. Uruk-hai archers a little bit more disposable, of course. Rotting meat coming forward. The catapult has, to be fair, but the catapult also has been sort of engaged in a bit of a cat and mouse with the attacking catapult as it is. Still, I feel as though the attackers haven't really got their organisation down. It's almost as if they're just not quite sure about what they want to do, or perhaps even that they're infighting. You go first. No, you go first. Definitely with the way that the elves and dwarves in particular have set their stall out here, that's how I would imagine the group chat for this particular attacking army going. Rohan have impressed me the most, I would say, with the fact that they've been certainly more willing to commit troops in than their elven and dwarven counterparts, which perhaps it makes a decent amount of sense, I would suspect. Rohan a little bit more eager to reclaim their homes. Westmark spearmen over here, moving in as well. Rohan, however, with the fact that they have invested in some more expensive units, they're not going to have the ability to do that forever, especially considering the slightly more fragile nature of the Rohirrim overall. What's going on over here? The dwarves thinking about leading the way. I mean, going through the gate at Helm's Deep, there's really no way to make it a pleasant experience for yourself. And I would definitely say that it's one of those situations where I'd say, yeah, do hold off on the gate and commit to it once this defence over here is starting to falter. This defence over here, though, is most certainly not starting to falter at the moment. Westmark Marshals perhaps thinking about going up the tower. Be a fairly serious unit to commit forward, I would have to say. This initial force out here that was being put in the way from Isengard, with a combination of those Rohirrim shock troops and this one unit of Elven line infantry, they are going to be able to get through. Catapult crew, as well as Uruk-hai infantry, are going to be standing in their way. And again, I still don't feel as though I've got a good grasp on how this battle's going to go. I mean, based on how the attacks have played so far, I wouldn't rate their chances all that highly. Just because it hasn't been particularly inspiring. But having said that, they haven't really lost anything too substantial for me to say, well, they're definitely going to lose at this point. So it's definitely a weird situation of a battle. That, it's like that was I think that was a blank shot actually. Although maybe it shouldn't be, because the Iron Watch of Miramir are coming in, and we've seen how effective they are at breaking up blobs in confined choke points. They're going to come forward here, and their overall goal is going to be pretty clear, I think. It's going to be to try and do horrendous damage to one of these two Isengard blobs, which would be a very good use of their time. it would make going directly through the gate a little bit more of an enticing prospect. Meanwhile, over here, I mean, this fight over here just hasn't gained any traction. Eastmark Spearmen at this point are routing, presumably due to the rotting meat. Eastmark Spearmen throwing a few more javelins in. Riddermark Axemen are breaking as well. Yeah, it must be the rotting meat. I mean, there was a lot of rotting meat that was poured into this one choke point. It's one of the few times, I think, where we've actually seen that be effective. Blades of the Wood going up the siege tower now after the Rohirrim around them broke. Or it even could have been the Elven support abandoning the Rohirrim that caused them to break. We shall have to wait and see. Meanwhile, over here, the Dwarven Miners, acting as the screen for the Iron Watch of Miramir, and at the first sign of trouble, the Iron Watch of Miramir are able to get away from the front lines. So that's good reactions, to be fair, from the Dwarven player. Dwarves are not exactly known for being swift. We can see here, Uruk-hai Crossmen, I think they are trying to go after the Iron Watch of Miramir, but it's not the easiest process here. Khazad-Dum reclaims as well, so all of a sudden the Dwarves committing forward some of their more heavy-hitting units, but ironically I think their siege tower is actually going to get in the way a bit here, certainly of the Iron Watch of Miramir. Less so maybe for the Khazad-Dum reclaimers if they can get a little bit further forwards. Siege tower is now moving. Yeah, I mean, again, I really don't understand what they're doing. I would assume that what they're going to try and do here is block the crossbows from hitting, which is a worthy goal when you put it like that, but these siege towers are going to get in the way of the assault up to the gate so badly, so I think it is ultimately a poor move. Time will tell. I may be eating my words come the end of the battle, but somehow I very much doubt it. Over here, meanwhile, another wave of the Rohirrim assault coming in. Some more Blades of the Wood over here. I think that is actually the same unit. No, it isn't. It's a different unit. So another Elven unit being committed forward. A rare sight on the front line of this battle so far, it would have to be said. Defeat seems certain for the Isengard troops at this point. Armour piercing combined with Elven skill, obviously going to be a good combination. And this is what's frustrating about this. I mean, snapshots like that show that if you come forward with the strength of the Rohan AP, the Dwarven rigidity and the Elven skill, all three of those things put together, overwhelming force if you commit all at once. This, though, if the attackers do go on to lose this battle, that will be a huge part of the reason why. And again, the Rohirrim just coming forward here, but once again it's very isolated pockets of a Rohirrim assault. And I mean, it looks bad for Rohan, but I don't really blame them, because they're not receiving much in the way of support from their allies at this point. Their allies seem content to just sit by and watch this happen. So I have a decent amount of sympathy for Irish Gunner in this sort of situation, to be honest with you. Blades of the Wood doing some good work up on the walls, as you would expect, to be fair. Blades of the Wood should easily be able to deal with Dunlending clansmen, but the problem here, of course, is the fact that there is very plentiful nearby skirmish support, and even just basic Uruk-hai archers are going to be able to do the business there. And at this point, the numbers discrepancy and the morale situation is such that the elves are probably going to end up losing that fight. Down on the ground, however, progress is being made. The same could be said of Isengard as well. I mean, Isengard is sending across some Uruk-hai pikes now, but they need to be ready to commit forward reinforcements. And if I were Isengard, I'd be licking my lips at this approach the attacks are taking, because basically what it allows you to do as Isengard is just keep committing units to the front line, because it will yield positive results if they're not prepared, the attackers, to commit forward reinforcements when they're needed. The reformed Riddermark Axemen that broke to the rotting meat, they're going to take the cleaner path this time and charge into the Dunlending clansmen, getting a decent charge on them. But ultimately, again, it comes down to numbers here. Axemen not the best at keeping themselves alive either, especially not sort of more basic Axemen like that, especially with the support of the skirmishers nearby as well. Again, it's coming down to Rohan, really, to make their own luck in this battle, and they have managed it to an extent up on this wall now. Westmark Infantry, you can see the Westmark Infantry, the quality they have in melee is far better than the likes of Uruk-hai archers and Dunlending veterans, as you would expect. The problem is, though, they're breaking because you saw there the volleys coming in from the Uruk-hai crossbowmen. Vicious volleys they were as well. Over here, meanwhile, you can see the initial assault. A combination of deaths from Isengard and from Khazad-Dum. But certainly Khazad-Dum have not made much in the way of progress. It's clear what Khazad-Dum want to do. They're going to want to get their Iron Watch and their Khazad-Dum Reclaimers to do a lot of the softening up on these solid Isengard positions. A decent goal if you can make that happen, but if you can't get too attached to one tactic. If things start to shift in the battle, you need to account for that. Crossbow bolts coming in as well. Isengard still holding on. I think there the Westmark Marshals were thinking about moving forward, but thought better of it with the support of those crossbowmen. Instead, some more solid infantry from Rohan coming forward. Eastmark and Westmark spears, so those shielded infantrymen. Westmark Marshals getting on the wall. I will criticise Rohan to a certain extent and say, if these Westmark infantry are going to get up on top of the walls, then the Westmark Marshals maybe should have followed them up sooner, if that was what's going to be the case. So the assault from all of the attackers in an inter-army sense has been very disjointed, but also in an intra-army sense, I would say that, you know, especially with Rohan, like, it has been a little bit broken just from that point of view as well, which doesn't bode well. Of course, the attackers have got far more errors that they can afford to make than the defenders. As this fight goes on, Westmark Spearman, you can see here he's trying to make something happen, he's trying to force an engagement, but once again Isengard just too solid on the front line here for assaults of this size, and there's not a lot of attack coming from other ways. I mean, this is probably going to yield some good results for Rohan. These Westmark Marshals getting onto the walls, you'd heavily back them in a fight against Dunlending veterans, as more of them make their way onto the walls, clear more of a spot, but of course, when a clear shot is available, the Uruk-hai crossbowmen are going to go to work again. And so far, Isengard are doing well in this fight, but they haven't really needed to do anything spectacular. I mean, here we can see Blades of the Wood clearing a decent spot on the walls, but all it's going to take is a little bit of reinforcements, I think, or even just a couple of... Yeah, here you can see a volley coming in from the Uruk-hai crossbows, doing good damage once again. Rohan trying to make some headway over here, but I think this assault is going to peter out before they make that headway. I mean, Westmark Spears are very good. You can see victory seems certain even in these odds for the Westmark Spears, which I think is maybe a little bit inaccurate. As soon as those pikes start to really come into this fight, it's going to be a real problem for them. And of course, if the attacking forces were hoping that the crossbow bolts would run out soon, it doesn't really matter if they do, because the Rangers are coming in now, and that's going to do damage to the Rohirrim as well. Still very slow here. You can see that what they're trying to do with the Khazad-Dum Reclaimers. The Khazad-Dum Reclaimers are shaken from, I guess, maybe the overwhelming numbers that are nearby. And in come the Uruk-hai crossbows that are out of ammunition again, just forcing them back again. So far, if I were on the Isengard team, I'd be very pleased with how this has gone. I mean, Helm's Deep, when you're outnumbered, it's a very defensible fortress, but there is a formula you can follow as the attackers to make it go pretty well for you. Obviously, overwhelming force on the lower walls after poking a few holes in it, then attack this archway, and then you can begin the genuine assault up this way as well. You can start mounting the walls from this side as well. So again, it's all a matter of the domino effect. As soon as you start winning down here in the lower wall, you can then carry that momentum throughout the rest of the settlement if you take a certain path. So far though, there's been really no semblance of momentum from the attackers down here in the lower walls. So I mean, it's not like they've been able to do that. Blades of the Wood, again, one unit coming down here, sort of going deep into the defence, but they're going to break. They've got no support. The rest of the Elven warriors, like, they're just being saved for later. My pet peeve. And I know that the comment section for this one is probably going to be just the same as it was for the last siege I did on Reforged as well, where I don't want to lay into people really, but I've watched enough of the game at this point to the point where I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's been not great from the attackers so far. They can, of course, turn this around. The quality of Khazad-Dum and Lothlorien is such they can turn this around quite easily. Because, of course, the flip side to not really committing much is the fact that you haven't really lost much either. But that is the reason why this Helm's Deep Siege is 40k frames. Sooner or later, something has to give here. Uruk-hai pikemen retreating from the front line. What have we here? Blades of the Wood. Defeat is a distinct possibility. Indeed it is. Staff Masters up on the walls, of course, with their extreme melee defense. There's no way as a unit like the Dunlending Clansmen going to be able to do much to them in melee. Slowly but surely, the Staff Masters will make some ground. Dunlending Veterans again, just now they're able to remount the walls. Slightly lower tier units getting into these positions now at this point, and this is where, if you're the attackers, you should look on this situation and go, they're trying to plug the gaps with crossbowmen. Now's the time to come forward. We've bided our time up until this point, but now is the moment for us to charge forth. And instead, it's Isengard that are leaving the safety of their walls, I think, foolishly. Obviously, Ord Malius, I think, is a slightly newer player, but yeah, he's coming forward. Defeat almost a certainty. Chasing down the Medicel Guard, perhaps thinking they're just standard Javelin men. Not going to happen though. Even if they did manage to close into them one-on-one in melee, the Medicel Guard will very comfortably be able to deal with the Dunlending Clansmen. In come the Lurtz Hunting Pack, doing a lot of damage with their body-piercing projectiles there on the Shield Maidens of Rohan. What have we here? Catapult crew coming in. Rohan, again, continuing to try and stoke the flames of this attack. In come the Silverthorns. Should be able to do a decent amount of damage. I mean, back here, Uruk-hai crossbows seems a little late at this stage in the game to be going after them with the crossbows. Rise of the Golden One, I think, yeah, Karen Amroth Rangers going after them as well. Going to take a lot of damage here, the Uruk-hai crossbows, but the crossbowmen back here have already done a decent job, so it's not a wash for Isengard by any means. Here, the dwarves coming forward, but again, it's just not enough. It's not enough. They need to be sending forward more than just this. Because in terms of sheer quality, of course the dwarves are going to outmuscle Isengard, but if you only send forward portions of your army at a time into this mass of Uruk-hai pikemen backed up by infantry, you're not going to make any ground. It's just not going to happen. More aggression needed from the attackers as a whole. Rohan have displayed it in fits and starts in this battle, but to no great avail. They haven't been particularly organised in and of themselves either, Rohan, but I mean, it's better than what the dwarves and the elves have displayed here, with the passivity in the extreme that I would say they have demonstrated. Lurtz Hunting Pack getting hit. And again, it's a situation where the attackers could very well turn this around, because now they could roll forward with overwhelming force in the late game, but in a similar way to how the defenders went on to win the last battle, I would heavily suggest that based on the performance so far, if the attackers do go on to win this battle, it won't be all that highly deserved. Meanwhile, these Staff Masters have taken a ton of damage, I would imagine, at the hands of crossbowmen, which is not a particularly good use of crossbow ammunition, to be honest with you, against a unit so cheap. Uruk-hai pikemen over here, still holding the line against the Rohirrim as they try to roll forwards. I mean, something's got to give at some point. I would imagine the attackers at this point are probably thinking, now we can roll forwards with everything we've got, surely, because we're getting towards the final 10k frames at this point in this battle. And that is where I would imagine something's going to change. You would think, anyway. I mean, the dwarves sending forward more guards of Khazad-Dum, very powerful infantry. Sons of the Fallen, very powerful infantry. More of Isengard's resources are probably going to be committed to over here, but the Lurtz Hunting Pack getting some good hits. If they can't get through this blob quickly, then yes, the dwarves are resilient to arrows, but that will still do some damage over time. Still, the fact that Dunlending veterans, who have been here since the battle's start, are still comfortably in control of this wall says it all, really. They, at the very least, should have been replaced by something higher tier a long time ago. And the Isengard here, I think they have got the right idea. They are systematically overwhelming portions of the defence. Uruk-hai Berserkers still in fine health. I mean, Isengard have taken losses, and it will still be costly for them to finish the attackers off, but I don't see why they can't do it, to be brutally honest with you. Uruk-hai Berserkers over here as well, still chanting. They may not have any black powder to blow themselves up with this time, but over here. This may be, I think, a little bit premature from Isengard to sort of spread the criticism a little bit. Going in here against all of these dwarven units, especially the guards of Khazad-Dum and the Sons of the Fallen, is going to result in the deaths of these trolls fairly quickly. They will get a few kills, of course, on the flip side of things. They will thin out the Dwarven ranks even more so. But yeah, good to see the AP being committed over here against the Dwarves though. The Half-Orc Baneguard will be far more useful against the Dwarves than they would be against the Remnants of Rohan or against Lothlorien. Yeah, I mean, Lert's hunting pack over here, out of ammo I think at this point, but solid enough in melee to still be a useful factor. Galatharan Blade Masters coming forward, Lert's hunting pack helping to shore up the lines. Karen Amroth Staff Masters continuing to try and do their thing, but it's going to be hard for them because they're getting overwhelmed. They're holding this huge mass of infantry in one place for a little while longer at least, which should be a good opportunity for the rest of the attackers to roll forwards. Yeah, I mean, if I were Isengard, like I said, at this point the battle has taken a turn in such a way that I would not pull back from the outer wall. I think it would be worth their while to just keep committing reinforcements down here. They need to do so in numbers. They need to do what the attackers have not been prepared to do and defend in a unified fashion from the front. In comes the Uruk-hai infantry to help shore up the lines, help out the Lert's hunting pack along with the Uruk-hai berserkers. There's a lot of strength added to the front line. It should be enough to hold this assault at bay for some time. Westmark Marshals in close melee with Uruk-hai infantry. The Westmark Marshals will really like that fight. Lots of AP going to be brought to bear. The Uruk-hai pikemen getting into position as well to try and counteract that push. In come the Helm Hammers. So at this point Rohan really dumping everything they have, and final 10k frames, so I'd imagine that's what the attackers as a whole are going to be doing pretty soon, but will they be able to? And have victory here? The Dwarves, I think they've taken far too long about this. Very half-hearted. Not enough courage early on, and then as their assault has begun, they've not been swift enough in getting reinforcements and mass to the front line, and as a result, they've stayed in the sight lines of a unit of rangers for too long. The pikes have been too comfortable. It takes a long time to kill Dwarves that way, but the deaths will still come. Shield Maidens getting up on top of the walls, Medicel Guard trying to support, as are the Woodland Protectors. Shield Maidens of Rohan doing a good job. I mean, this is exactly the sort of situation where the Shield Maidens of Rohan should be super useful. Karen Amroth Rangers are here. At this stage, one has to wonder, these Lorinard Warriors need to be on the front line somewhere. Kindred of Celeborn are somewhere. Karas Gladhorn's Guardians are over there. Where be the split shots? Karen Amroth Rangers, body piercing projectiles again trying to shoot down the Uruk-hai crossbowmen. Staff Masters have been cleaned up. Helms Hammers penetrating deep into enemy lines, doing a lot of damage, but ultimately once again there's nothing really to follow them in. These Blade Masters that were on the front line with them have taken a lot of damage. That could be good though. Irish Gunner getting his shield mains up onto the walls, that's good. And now raining death down upon the Isengard troops. This is a good opportunity that the attackers have seldom had at this point, and now they need to move forward with a lot of what they have. And again, I sense a notable lethargy to the attackers here. The Dwarves held in place. At this point I think the best thing the Dwarves can do is hold all of this infantry in place for long enough that Rohan and Lothlorien on the other side start to make gains. And to be fair, I mean, Isengard, they haven't got too much left. They've got nothing in the town centre. Everything they have is pretty much being committed at this point in time. But I think that's the right way to go about things, considering the way this battle has gone. And if you organise well, victory should be yours. Uruk-hai Berserkers dealing a lot of damage here to the Rohirrim and some of the elves that have managed to make it this far. My Smart Marshal's defeat is almost a certainty. Only a military genius could win this battle. And that's mostly down to the pikes, I would imagine, but if you can overwhelm their formation, opportunity calls. Medicel Guard mounting the walls, Nazkai getting down here now, both units. You can tell Isengard sending some more of their elite units down here now with the also Guards of Orthanc helping to shore up this line. I mean, all of this Rohan AP, if it fizzles out before the spears are out of the way, it could be very difficult to get through the Guards of Orthanc. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers throwing their axes in. Half-Orc Baneguard with the AP, the pikes still over here. It's still going to be costly for Isengard, but I would back them in this situation. I think at this point the attackers, to a certain extent, have dug their own graves and continue to do so. 1st Legion Infantry coming in. 3rd Legion Infantry, not 1st Legion I should say. If it was 1st Legion, it could be a different story. Again, like, look at this. Look at this. It's my pet hate. Both units of elite infantry not wanting to get their hands dirty. They could be in there, doing damage. The Lurtz hunting pack is gone. You know, they've repositioned themselves to go over here, trying to go on to Pastures New, shooting into the Medicell Guard and the Woodland Protectors over here. The opportunity is still there for the attackers. Their quality could still be too much for Isengard if they seize the day. But as this battle trundles on, they've been reluctant to do that so far. And I would imagine that is a trend which is almost certainly going to continue. Bolts, finding their marks. It's a depleted unit, but every little bit of damage is going to help here. As the defenders continue to try and hold on. The Rangers still trying to find the ideal target, and I think that's kind of certainly been Lothlorien's problem in this battle. They've spent so much time trying to find the ideal opening that in the end they're going to miss any openings at all. The Dwarves, Khazad-Dum Reclaimers out of ammunition. They're going to add themselves to the front line. Strong, certainly. It's an even fight at this point. I don't think Isengard deserve a loss, but they could still receive one just through sheer quality here. Now coming up onto the walls, Lothlorien warriors. Dunlending veterans. Defeat seems certain now. They've occupied this wall for a long time at this point. Galathryn Blade Masters. But Isengard victorious down here on the floor. The last thing they need to be doing though is chasing the elves onto the open field with all of their ranged units like the Riders of the Golden Wood. As tempting as it may be, Isengard have got themselves into a decent position here. They really don't want to be throwing it away by playing into the hands of the elven archers. And that could be exactly what they do. That's a shame. Like I said, Lothlorien, I feel like they have been guilty of waiting for the ideal target. I don't think they've deserved an ideal target being presented to them, but there it was. These are Urukai infantry forced up against the... You can see how resilient the staff masters are in melee. They're still fighting away over here on the walls, when a lesser unit would have been killed off long ago. But yeah, I mean at this point Isengard are going to clean up down here. If they're wise, they will not chase the elves onto the open field. They will maintain their position, and with that, I think they will be victorious here. Because I can't really see... I mean, the Dwarves, I think they will win up here, actually, with the Mithril Guard and the Guards of Khazad-Dum. They've got enough quality there. I mean, it's going to be close, though. Even if the Dwarves do win, I think it'll be a fairly Pyrrhic victory. Certainly, they'll be damaged by the time they come through. Isengard down here have had a much more comprehensive victory in melee. Lothlorien warriors, they've taken some hits, I think, from a ranged unit. Taken more damage than the Dunlending veterans could mete out to them. Well, there were some crossbows over there, not an ideal shot, but still one. Again, Isengard making a little bit of an error there in trying to chase the elves onto the open field. I'm all for aggression, but Isengard don't need to be aggressive here. I would say, actually, it's probably worth Isengard's time to retreat at this point, and Hrothgar, I think, has had the same idea. Because at this stage, they've done crippling damage to the attackers as they are down here. Iron Watch and Miramir, we did see them destroy the husks of those catapults and do a good amount of damage to the blob of infantry there. Could still be a factor later on in the battle. Isengard, if they decide to blob up in the keep itself, could be risky for them. They've definitely done a good job down here in the lower reaches of the fortress. Riders of the Golden Wood now moving in to try and block a retreat. These crossbows, I think, are out of ammunition, I mean, and they need to be careful as well, because there are still berserkers over here, which are pretty... There's still a decent amount of them left. Flip side to that is, though, Isengard probably aren't going to be able to save those berserkers. The dwarves Yeah, you can see the dwarven quality here. The Reclaimers adding their strength to melee, that other unit of 3rd Legion as well. Battering through this defence, even with the solid guards of Orthanc here. They were never going to be able to hold on to this this particular defence for all that long. But Isengard now retreating back to the keep. It is going to be a close battle, this. Another bizarre battle, I would say. Not quite up to the same sort of level as the previous battle. But similar lessons to be learned, I think. From players, I think they should know better as well. Certainly their names, I recognise Pharaoh's name. I recognise Son of the Dunedain's name. They've been playing the game long enough to not fall into those particular traps, I think. But I think their side, once again, it could be a case of the dwarven quality just carrying the day here. Because I don't know if Isengard have got enough resources left. And resource management is very important when you're on the defence, and if they don't have like crossbow bolts or something which can really help even the odds against something like the Meteor Guard, they could end up losing out here. It will be harsh on Isengard, I think. Not because they've played up particularly well, because they have made a few errors as well, but because I think the attackers have been so disjointed. What have we here? Uruk-hai Berserkers trying to hunt down the Riders of the Golden Wood. Very isolated at this point though, the Berserkers. They're going to be shot by the Riders of the Golden Wood, I think. Engaged in melee by the Lothlorien warriors as well. Punishing time for them, but they will always go down swinging, Berserkers. Karas-Clad Hans Guardians, another really strong unit here in the late game. I mean, in terms of numbers, Isengard have got an advantage there, but in terms of quality, I mean, the Nazkai and the Berserkers are all well and good. But do they have enough to bring down the quality that is before them? We shall see. Because that is the question that has to be asked here, I think. As the Dwarves continue to try and slog through this choke battle. A sort of fight which they are very often very much at home in. But they are now completely without support, really. Well, I say that. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers still have ammunition. That was wise from Pharaoh, to give him some credit. I've railed on him a little bit in this battle, to be fair, but I don't want to do that, but it's one of those situations where I've watched the game so much at this point. But those axes being thrown into good effect against Isengard at this point, and that could be a real difference maker. They've been slow and lethargic throughout most of this battle, I think, Khazad-Dum, but they have got enough resources here in the late game that I think they are going to be able to pull through. Nazkai going to chase those Khazad-Dum Reclaimers off, and then they need to get into the Iron Watch, I think. What remains of Lothlorien and Rohan on their way forward. See, like that. Look at this. It's not even the General's Bodyguard unit, and it's being saved. They're certainly going to have nice shiny armour and weapons by the end of this battle with their inability to be committed. Nothing bugs me more than that. It's such a campaign mentality to have. It's something you need to lose for multiplayer. Over here, meanwhile, Lothlorien warriors chasing the Nazkai down, but the Nazkai are an opponent which will be very difficult to bring down at the best of times. Iron Watch of Miramir. If they start shooting that, yeah, like I think this is going to be the killer blow. Once again, I find it hard to endorse the attackers for a deserved win here. It's not been a particularly great battle from the defenders either, I would say. A few foolish fights to take, but the attackers, it's been one of those situations where they've been slow, lethargic, not particularly united in what they wanted to do, clearly. But yeah, that's going to be the end. A player admits defeat, and I think that is Rohan. Must be, who's admitted defeat. Yeah, and with the Iron Watch of Miramir, a finishing blow here. Not a particularly decisive unit in this battle, because I think even if they just got committed to melee, they would have slowly caused a victory here for the attackers. But yeah, the quality here in the late game has just been too much. But you will not find me endorsing the way the attackers played this battle today. More often than not, if you're up against experienced players who know how to ration their resources, then you're going to be in trouble, I think. Massive trouble. Because of course the counter argument to my attitude on this way of playing is, well, the attackers won. They had enough quality in the late game because they conserved it. No, not for me. Not in this situation. If you're up against players who are able to position a good defence, use their resources well, like the crossbows and the archers were used a little bit too freely by Isengard in this situation. If they were used more wisely, the attackers wouldn't have won this. Yeah, and I think it's time. At this point, Isengard being hunted down, and then Arskai will fight to the bitter end on top of this wall. I mean, it was a valiant effort from Isengard, but again, it comes down to resource management from Isengard. If they'd managed to do that, they would have won this fight, I think. The attackers, a lot of things, I think, that could be improved on that. Because Rohan were willing to be aggressive. They didn't use their whole army to be aggressive, but that's not necessarily something you should expect to have to do. I think Khazad-Dum, and especially Lothlorien, I think the way the Lothlorien player bugs me in this fight, especially. Down to the fact that they had their most elite unit just hanging out at the back the whole time, not doing anything for no real reason. But that is the situation. Lothlorien with the fewest kills, which I think goes to show that they were sort of conservative and holding back and wanting to conserve the lives of their troops, which is fine in campaign, but in multiplayer it does reflect rather poorly. Rohan getting a decent amount of kills, to be fair, considering they were getting battered because they were the only ones being aggressive in the early game. Khazad-Dum, their quality, and obviously stuff like the Iron Watch seeing them through in the end. And the Khazad-Dum, well, the dwarves in general, I should say, not the Khazad-Dum, being used as a bit of a crutch in the last two sieges, I think, because it has been dwarven muscle that has seen sort of a team which is maybe unworthy, has seen them over the line. And that has been the situation. And Isengard have been on the receiving end of that now a couple of times, I would suggest. But Isengard here, resource management was the key here, because it wasn't as if Isengard were completely squeaky clean in this particular fight. Resource management was needed. And I think that will be seen. I mean, you can see Nazkai doing well, Lurt's hunting pack for Hrothgar doing very well. That's exactly what you want to see from your Rangers. And Hrothgar has played the game enough to the point where this is the kind of thing you would expect from him. Sort of good numbers all around, I would suggest. Ord Malleus, however, you see that these units have done substantially less well. Crossbowmen doing okay, to be fair. Lurt's hunting pack doing okay, but what targets were these on? Like, we saw numerous examples of crossbows and archers going after targets which maybe weren't all that important. And in the end, you know, that will play into the hands of a team which is trying to conserve their resources for later on, which is a shame, because other than that, I think Isengard, you know, would have done okay in this fight. But as it is, the quality of the dwarves just able to muscle through in the end. So yeah, big thank you to Hrothgar for sending this one in. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of this one. The next battle that I will showcase, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. I've got a few that I can choose from. It is also worth saying, I think a lot of the battles that I've been sort of trying to do have actually sort of been marked as errors, played on a different version of the game data on certain maps, which may indicate that I need, if you're playing on a map that you downloaded and you want me to showcase it, I'm going to need the map as well. I think that is the key there. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me, whatever is next.